There's a big filing in the 11th Circuit regarding Trump's classified documents case. It's a motion asking for the removal of Judge Cannon. This is Dina Doll with the MeidasTouch Network. Let's break this down. But it wasn't filed by Jack Smith. It was filed by CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. And it was filed as an amicus brief. Amicus briefs are filings that not the parties to the case make, but those that are interested in the outcome of the case. And they're usually scholars, as CREW has quite a lot of scholars and names the specific scholars that are attached to this motion. People who have studied this area of law, that are experts in this area of law, and are helping guide the court in making its determination. So they are saying to the 11th Circuit, if you decide to overrule Judge Cannon's decision regarding the special counsel. Now, if you remember, Judge Cannon dismissed the charges against Trump altogether because of what Justice Clarence Thomas said in the Supreme Court immunity decision. What he said is not binding law. He said dicta, which is essentially something a judge says that isn't coming before the court, so has no binding authority. But she uses these sentences that he writes in his concurring opinion as a basis for dismissing the case outright. And as we know, it's very settled law that the Attorney General can appoint a special counsel. So the CREW is essentially saying to the 11th Circuit, you have in front of you this appeal from Jack Smith asking you to overturn the dismissal of the charges based on the special counsel argument. If you decide in his favor, which they should, there's really not much of a question that 11th Circuit will do this. If you decide in Jack Smith's favor, this will now be the third time you have had to overturn Judge Cannon. And because of this, you should not only overturn her dismissal, but you should remove her. And the case they lay out in their motion is hugely convincing, and let's just go into it because it is such a great, well laid out motion. So CREW shows in its motion why the removal of Judge Cannon is necessary, how it qualifies under the Torkin factor that the 11th Circuit needs to look at, how it satisfies all three of them. And they lay out the first one, that Judge Cannon cannot put aside her previous views and findings if she is, if they reverse the dismissal and the case goes back to her. The motion says here, a reversal here would mean that the court has had to reverse Judge Cannon 3 times, each time because she reached out to adopt pro-defense practices and theories that directly contradicted long-standing law. And her rulings and other conduct create the appearance of an unshakable conviction that subjecting a former president to ordinary criminal procedures represents an intolerable affront to his dignity. If you remember, that was one of the reasons of why she said that she had to appoint a special master in this particular case, because it involved a former president. And so it involved his dignity and it needed extra special effort. And that in particular was what the 11th Circuit was one of the things they called her out on when they reversed it. They said, nobody is above the law. We do not care more about essentially the dignity of a former president than anybody else's dignity. Like, that's not a reason to appoint a special master. And if you remember the whole special master controversy, what that was about was that, the FBI, they were able to, execute their search warrant and they got the documents from, or whatever they were able to get, right? Some of them he was hiding at first. They were able to get the documents from Mar-a-Lago. And then the idea was to look at their evidence to be able to see whether or not they did, in fact, have enough evidence to form an indictment. And she stopped that, saying that, no, they need to have a special master's because Trump had said some of these could be attorney-client privilege, even though this was at his home, not his lawyer's home. And so she used as a basis saying, he as a former president should have this extra dignity. And, this is an affront to his dignity. And the 11th Circuit, roundly rejected that, saying nobody's above the law. And when CREW mentions that the 11th Circuit, if they overturn her dismissal based on the special counsel, will have done it 3 times, 2 of that dismissals or overturns they already did with Judge Cannon has to do with that special master issue. And that special master issue came before the indictment. So it came before she was kind of like officially assigned as the trial judge for these new, so she already had this even before she was assigned it. but nobody has asked for her removal before Crew. So they're laying out the factors for the 11th Circuit to look at. And the first one being that if she remains on the case, if you reverse her now and the case is reinstated, she's not going to be able to put aside her prior views. Every time you have had to reverse her 11th Circuit, it has been because she has sided with the defense, and she has sided with the defense in these kind of like outrageous ways. The special masters, because of this dignity of the former president, no real basis in law or precedent. And then also because of this, statement by Justice Clarence Thomas, despite the fact that there's settled law on this. So these aren't instances that are just like, closely disputed areas of law that they're overturning, or maybe brand new areas that they're overturning. They are overturning her in these like ways that she's blatantly showing her pro-defense point of view. And so that satisfies one of the factors, according to Crew, in this filing. The second factor that they say that is satisfied, and so she should be removed, is that the reassignment is appropriate in order to preserve the appearance of justice, because that is obviously a big concern, is we always want there to be an appearance of justice, not only for the defendant, but for everybody else to basically buy into the outcome. And so they're arguing here in Crew, and I think very effectively, that because she had already kind of ignored so much of the statutory law and the Supreme Court precedent, that she was kind of already showing that there was like a impartial, like a bias there. And also the fact that, her delay, and they bring this up a lot in the motion very effectively, her delays, and the fact that Trump has, used that strategy in many of his cases. So it wasn't, like a novel idea that he might want to delay the case, and that she helped him essentially delay the case quite a bit. They mentioned the fact that, she was basically, one actually factor that they didn't mention in the motion, and I kind of wish they had, was the date that she dismissed the case. Because, we know she delayed everything, enough that she was waiting until the Supreme Court immunity decision. And then what does she do as soon as that delay is effective for her? And Justice Clarence Thomas writes her this little message in the decision. She dismisses it quickly, no delay there. And when does she dismiss it? She dismisses it on the first day of the Republican National Convention. And Crew doesn't mention that here. They're probably trying to, there's so many other facts and law that help support their argument. But to me, like the fact that she dismissed it that day of all days, just shows like her bias in general. She shows it with how outrageous she is with her decisions, with the delay, and then the timing of it, to do it that first day. And also that first business day after the rally, where he was shot at. So that timing of that is definitely not a coincidence. They may not have pointed that out in the motion, but the 11th Circuit certainly knows that timing of that. So I imagine that will also be something that the justices, consider. It does not help, let's say, for her trying to show that she's impartial. It's yet another factor of showing how partial she actually is. And I see all the time comments calling her stupid. I think she's very strategic. She's very biased. There's so many Trump lawyers out there who make decisions that make zero sense, such as the Trump judge out in Texas who did the abortion pill opinion that made zero sense. People call him biased all the time. She's biased. She's strategic. She got what she wanted, which was not to have this case at all, in front of her. But so here's Crew laying out the second factor is met. She needs to be removed in order to preserve the appearance of justice. And the third one, which is very interesting, is that the reassignment of a judge wouldn't cause like unnecessary waste or duplication, that the benefit of it isn't going to, waste court resources or frankly, the attorney or prosecutor's resources. Courts are always very cognizant of not wasting court resources because everybody, has to have their day in court and you need to not, make things like unnecessarily a waste of everybody's time, let's say. So to that, her delays actually make this factor more in the favor of removing her because she didn't get anything done. They could have been a lot farther with their pretrial motions, but they didn't really get anywhere. So to that certainly is helpful to meet the factor of removing her, not causing any necessary delay. They are not that far along because of her delays. So it's interesting that the delays kind of count both ways. It shows an appearance of bias, and then it also shows that removing her is not going to there's not going to be that much duplication as the result of it. They quote Judge Cannon as saying, quote, as a function of plaintiff's former position as president of the United States, the stigma associated with the subject's seizure is in a league of its own. A future indictment based to any degree on property that ought to be returned would result in reputational harm of a decidedly different order of magnitude. This is where she was trying to have the special master review the documents, and the 11th Circuit resoundingly overturning her here. This is one of the three that they are citing here, crew, of showing, hey, every time basically it's come up to you, you've said that she's wrong. So let's do something about it, essentially. And they're quoting the 11th Circuit in case they didn't remember how badly they thought she, stepped out of bounds, let's say, with that ruling. The crew says this court's decision marked the wholesale repudiation of Judge Cannon's view that former presidents are entitled to extraordinary protections in criminal investigations, creating a special form of equitable jurisdiction to benefit former presidents. This court explained, quote, would defy our nation's foundational principle that our law applies to all without regard to numbers, wealth, or rank. End quote. That was how strongly the 11th Circuit disagreed with her wanting to give special leeway to the president. And that's what's so interesting here. The first time they were asked to review her decision, it was her wanting to give special leeway to her president around the documents, whether or not they could basically comb through and look at the documents that were seized. And then when we saw trial, we saw that she may not have used those words again, but she acted that way by giving him the special treatment, with the delays, with these asking for jury instructions months before trial on nonsensical positions that the defense had, instead of just making a decision that could then be appealed one way or another. Taking actions, doing the dismissal based on this random quote, doing it on the day of the RNC. She showed how much she thought that a president should be treated differently, because she did treat him differently. And they also were quoting here in the, just talking about how little she has done. Again, this goes to both things. It talks about the fact that it wouldn't be a waste of court resources, and the fact that the delay was done to benefit Trump. And they say in their motion here, and as to trial's structure, Judge Cannon had not yet addressed a single substantive issue. This indictment was filed back in 2022. This is how long she's had this case. Still ahead lay decisions about presidential immunity, attorney-client privilege, and protection of classified information under the Classified Information Protection Act. So lots of issues she hadn't even gone to, which is helpful, again, for those two factors. Judge Cannon's delays were partly attributable to her refusal to delegate pretrial motions to a magistrate judge, a departure from normal practice that maximized her control over the case. Maybe what seemingly seems like a small point, but not a small point, because why would you deviate from normal practices unless you are treating this defendant special unless you are giving him special treatment. And hey, 11th Circuit, you already told her he shouldn't be having special treatment. Our law doesn't allow for former presidents to have special treatment. And so why are you doing something that's so outside your normal practice by not enlisting a magistrate judge in order to have this moved along quickly? So crew, finally filing the motion that we have all been waiting for, because we've been seeing ever since she first had eyes on this back with the documents, that she was biased. And now crew laying out in detail facts and law that are very convincing to the 11th Circuit that if you decide to overturn her with this, she needs to also be removed. So I will keep you updated as things go along, but certainly an important development in Trump's Mar-a-Lago classified document case.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.